Hi and welcome to AXSchat. We're delighted to have Aine Healy with us today, or tonight, or whatever godforsaken time it is in Australia right now. Thank you for getting up in the middle of the night to talk to us. It's a real pleasure to have you with us. We've been loving your interactions with AXSchat over the last few months. It's really great that you could join us today. Aine, for those of you that don't know her, is CEO of Attitude Foundation, but today we're talking about something called 19 Stories. Given that the AXSchat is on the 19th of December, it seems perfectly appropriate. So, Aine, if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about yourself and how 19 Stories came to be.
Thank you. It's exciting to be on AXSchat. I think you guys can answer any tech accessibility question I've ever had online, so it's good. The person missing from the conversation, it couldn't be here, is Piers Gooding, who's an academic from Melbourne University, and he did the project with an organisation called Belonging Matters, and what they wanted to do was tell stories about inclusion and about how inclusion actually works, because it's something we talk a lot about and how it happens, etc. But they really want to put together some practical stories and some nice stories about inclusion to sort of give people motivation and ideas about how it can work in our community. So Piers, together with Belonging Matters, interviewed 19 people and then put their stories together. And there are a range of stories about employment, volunteering in your community, going to school, etc. And then I came in a bit later in the piece because I was so excited by the project, because it was nice to see something positive and interesting in the space, and I think a really, really good use of storytelling. So I worked with Piers to then how we could have a much better online presence and promote 19 Stories so everybody could hear about it.
So what's the reason behind all the project that Piers started? Was it a need to bring this type of stories to the public, to everybody to be able to read them? Is there what was his main objective in starting the project?
Yeah, his main objective, I think, in starting the project was that people would have really practical information and learn from peers about how inclusion actually happens. Sometimes, and Piers would laugh being an academic, saying sometimes we make things way too confusing. So it's nice just to have some information and have some stories, and storytelling as an educative tool works much better than I guess instructions or telling people exactly you should be doing this, you should be doing this. And it kind of, you know, the whole adage, show don't tell, I think was behind it. The other thing which they did then as well was linked to resources and other stuff. So once people sort of had seen the stories and stuff as well, there was other information as well available online.
So the thing that is that could we relate the need for these stories for some generating change and perceptions also about the lives of people with disabilities?
Yeah, I think so. So I mean, we know that for lots of people with disability, they are lonely or would like to have better relationships and be more involved in their community. So it's nice to show that this can actually happen and show stories of success. The other thing too, which was a really nice positive of the stories, was showing how people actually with disabilities actually contributed to their community. So there's one man in the stories that he's a volunteer at his local police museum, and he's very valued there because he's got great history and knowledge about what he does. There's another man who is employed at his local Woolworths, and he's, you know, been employee of the month, and he's like, his customer service is just exceptional. And there's customers that say, well, we really miss him when he's not there, and he's, you know, the friendliest person. I really like coming to the supermarket as well. So it's really nice that it shows the benefit of inclusion for the whole community and not just the person with a disability.
Deborah, I know you have a question.
I do. And thank you so much for getting up so early. It's 3 o'clock in the morning in Australia. And so you really bless us. And we're so proud of your promotion to CEO too. So, so we got to brag about you there. But, you know, one thing that I think we all have realized, and, you know, some people maybe before others, is that it really is about the storytelling. That's how we change culture's minds about different segments of our population. And I think these stories are so powerful. I know that's one reason why we created AXSchat, was we wanted to really help turn up the volume on the people like you and Piers and others that are really trying to, you know, change people's minds about what we all can bring to the table if given the opportunity. And so I was just curious on, with the 19 stories, is there more plans? Are y'all going to broaden it? Are you going to take it to, you know, other markets? I mean, how can our community support what you're trying to do there? Because we need these stories coming from all over the world, reminding everyone that, you know, human beings are human beings first. And yes, you know, sometimes a human being is born like my daughter with Down syndrome with an extra chromosome, but it doesn't mean she doesn't have a full life to live that's, you know, includes giving back to her community. So I think it's so powerful seeing these stories come from Australia and other parts of the world. I was just wondering if, you know, what the next phase of this was going to be.
So the initiative was sponsored through Melbourne Uni. So Piers got you know, a small amount of project funding to do the work, and of course it ended up blowing up into something much bigger than that. So I guess funding wise, that sort of part of it has closed up. I know from when we put it online, and we did like a 19 stories in 19 days thing on Twitter, which really helped leverage it out to lots of communities. Since then, we've heard lots of different ways that people have been using it, and I guess just through the organic nature of social media, we'll continue to push stuff. We know some people want to add to the stories, and perhaps adding some more stories of people from culturally and linguistic diverse backgrounds. So hopefully someone will collect some of those stories and put them together. We've heard of people using them as education tools, so either as promoting them with their staff or showing them to people with disabilities as well themselves. So we're encouraging that to happen as well. And as we're able to sort of, I guess promote and share, and then I guess feedback to us about how people are using them and how they're successful, I guess in the future we may do something else. But, you know, if other people want to collect and curate their own stories, that would also be great as well. I mean, a lot of people have said, oh, thank goodness, like finally some positive stories. I mean, there's a lot of negative things that happen and you know, obviously do need to be highlighted in the community. But a lot of people were just like, oh, thank goodness, it's nice just to see people getting on and living life and doing stuff. So, you know, showing by example there's been really good. But yeah, we're just encouraging lots and lots of sharing. Piers and I will at some stage write up what we learnt from doing the project, and I think as a bit of a tool in perhaps how academics and activists or advocates can sort of work together. Piers is very good at sharing his stuff online, and not all academics perhaps are as good as that. So we're sort of working out how can we better translate knowledge, how can we better make stuff more available, more freely available, etc. So hopefully that will be a piece that we'll be able to share in the future as well, and encourage other people to sort of get on board. Yeah, and I think Piers and I had, because of the way the sort of project was structured, and because it was linked to Belonging Matters as well, a small organisation in Melbourne, we had a fair bit of leniency with how we could promote things. So that was good.
You know, I thought it was interesting, the point you made, that you put the stories out there and then people, the way they used them, it wound up being fascinating to you. Elizabeth Gilbert, she's or Liz Gilbert, she's one of my favorite authors. She wrote, I always say it wrong, Eat, Pray, Love, and she's written some other. Yes. I love her work. And she said that once you are an author or you create something, you create the stories like you did, and you put it out in the world, really, at that point, you need to step back and just see what the world's going to do with it. It's not really almost your business anymore, what the world is going to do with that content that you put out there lovingly, I think. And so I think about that a lot with our work we do at AXSchat and my programs and even my books. It's you put it out there and then people find them and they use it for a lot of different reasons. But I think the power of storytelling is, the power, it changes people's lives and it really helps. I remember when I first got into this business in the 2000s, I would have people often ask me, well, I had no idea that blind people could use computers. And I know it's amazing. Yeah. And now nobody ever says that anymore, because why wouldn't you use a computer just because you are blind or something else? And so I think the power of storytelling is how we're going to change people's minds about what the community of people with disabilities can contribute to society if we'll just let them. But let me turn it over to Neil. He has a comment to make.
Well, you're obviously not, thank you, Deborah, you're obviously not talking to some of the software vendors that I talk to who still have those attitudes, even 20 years later, saying, well, so that's another reason why you still need these great stories. One of the things that I'm very interested in is really finding out a bit more about what's going on in Australia too, because there's been a huge amount of legislative progress.
That's a whole other show now.
Yeah, I know, but I'm curious because we do see good stuff happening. We see there's there's always one step forward, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But there's national policy being put in place. There's significant amounts of work being done on web accessibility. Where once we weren't seeing this, we're seeing a lot of activity from your part of the world. And why do you think that is? What's changed?
A few things. I think people with disabilities and their families and supporters, want better lives and are demanding and working harder for that, and aren't being passive recipients, I guess, in the process of things which people work for a long time. But I think one of the really big drivers is that we've implemented the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which is I don't know what I can sort of compare it to, but basically it's an entitlement scheme that and it should work on the premises that if you have a disability and you have support needs, we will meet those support needs. You will make a plan, and then we will fund what stuff it is around for that. And that funding is individualised, and you can take it with you wherever you would live in Australia, and it's sort of nationalised our system. And the underpinnings of that is that everybody can contribute, everyone can participate, etc. People do belong in community, doing stuff, can work if they need to, etc. Should be able to have reasonable adjustments and so on. So it sounds wonderful. In implementation, it's been there's a lot of issues, so it's very new. So we're only a couple of years in, and they staged the rollout across Australia, and they started sooner than what they were meant to. And it's interesting, so mostly in the media and coverage you see about that, you see mostly the negative stuff, and that, of course that needs to be aired, and everyone needs to have a process to contribute to improving the scheme, and it's a long-term thing to be doing that. So again, I think there was a really nice response to 19 Stories when you actually were showing some of the possibilities. And there's a few stories in there too as well that show just how I guess with community attitudes changing, legislation changing, etc. There were some people who'd moved out of institutions, etc., and were living, in their community and reconnected with family and made new friends, etc. There was other people who, were in mainstream schooling, which is what I'd be advocating for, and many people would be advocating for as well. But of course, hasn't always been the option or on offer. That said, it's still a big bone of contention, inclusive education. So I think those sort of things have, sort of have led to lots of stuff happening. I think the good thing about the NDIS is that it's really opened up for a lot of people to see more possibilities, and I guess not just, turn up to a service provider and see what the service provider can offer you. It's much more about, well, what is it that I want, in my life? What's a good life for me? And what supports will I need to create that? And some of the supports might come from the NDIS scheme, but lots of the supports might come from the community. And there's work, but there probably needs to be more going on around, well, how can the community get more involved? What's their role in inclusion? How are they, part of this? Which, of course, is very similar to lots of the AXS work that's done about, inclusion is responsibility of whole of community, not just the disability community. Yeah.
So no, I actually saw NDIS as a positive thing. Yes, I know there's some negativity around the implementation, but boy, it's bumpy wherever you implement these kind of things. You're never going to be in for a smooth ride. So I saw it as positive.
Yeah, look, and generally, if it works, it should do. There's also a national disability strategy, which is a whole of government plan around, well, how do we also improve health systems, justice systems, education, transport, etc., so that altogether everything does, because the NDIS alone is not going to fix things. We did look a lot to the UK before the NDIS came out and before your austerity measures hit, but looked a lot at individualised funding, because that wasn't that popular here, or personalisation, so people having their own budgets of money to spend. So that's a lot of new thinking for people, and having to sort of go, oh wow, I do have a package of money to spend. How will I do that? How will I manage that, etc.? So there's been quite a lot of capacity building work going on as well in Australia, which is great, because that obviously goes over to other areas of life as well, beyond how you manage your support package. There's a great organisation in Australia's Newcastle that says it's not the size of your package that counts, it's what you do with it. So people are starting to come up with some really creative and interesting ways to get the good life that we all want.
Fantastic. Deborah, I know you have another question.
Yes, I love that. That's because we learn with humor too. So I think it's clever when
I know.
Words. That's very clever. Yeah, Aine, you had mentioned one brand that I actually talked about in my my book on employment, Woolworths, which was a huge organization in the United States. We remember them fondly, and I always talk. When I'm in the US, I always say, do you know Woolworths is still here, but it's in Australia now. So we remember them fondly. But are there any other brands in your part of the world that deserve mentioning on the show that are including us? Any other brands come to your mind?
I don't know what it is about the banks. I know Barclays is talked about a lot in the UK. ANZ in Australia have been doing a lot of work on accessibility, both as at the consumer end of accessible banking features, and that sort of type of stuff, and also they've just set up a program around financial literacy as well for people as a skill set, but also they've set up a thing where they've specifically proactively targeted employing people with autism, and are seeing how that sort of will work through their system as well. Harris Farm is another grocer here that does fresh produce, and they've had a good track record in employing people with disability as well. So yeah, there is a few that we could shout out to.
Yeah, and we always want to encourage shout outs from the brand. And I know that Neil wants to comment on the banking, so I'm going to let him do that. But I think the more we reward the brands by doing shout outs for them, like as we all know, we love Barclays Bank, but we love them because they're always including us. But Neil, let me turn the mic.
So I was just going to say the other one as well, which kind of crosses over to kind of my other work as well, but is Target, which I'm not sure if you've got Target in the States yet, and Kmart as well. So they've been really good with inclusive advertising. So just having kids as part of the toy catalogue, so you'll get, I don't like my child getting them because then he gets so excited and wants every piece of Lego under the sun, but I'm just a mean mother. But so, you just open the toy catalogue and there's a range of kids. As you see in the street, there's just a range of kids, but, some of the kids might have Down syndrome or autism or whatever else like that. But starting with Julius is a an organisation that a mum set up to sort of promote and do that. But Target and Kmart have been, you know, big uptake of that now because, and the good thing too is Katya would make a great interview actually, so I should get her on the show at some stage. But you know, she's saying just leading by example. It's now easier to say to other people once they can see a catalogue or see an ad and go, oh yeah, that works, etc. And it's been, of course, really positive and worked well for Target and Kmart. So you know, I think other people will sort of get on the bandwagon, and hopefully it will just become part of, you know, how we do advertising, how we do media, how we do shopping. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just a normal. And what's
NVDA?
It's a screen reader. It's a screen reader.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, who's in Australia too. But I will just say that we do have Target and Kmart in the States, and Target has done a lot of amazing jobs. So we love them. But Neil, I know you wanted to make a comment about banking, so let me turn it over to you.
Oh yeah, well, it was mainly the fact that the banks have recognized that the high net worth individuals tend to be older, tend to have disabilities.
I think they'd get that.
Yeah, they've done the math. Yeah, it's quite clear. I mean, it's in their interest to do this stuff, but they've recognized it, and that's the thing. And we still need to give them plaudits for having recognized that this is happening, because a lot of companies haven't still recognized that this is a fact, and it's only going to get more so as the population's age, etc. So
yeah, I mean,
well done to the banks.
Yeah. Inclusion and accessibility, I mean, you know, are good for people, which I think is the bottom line, but obviously I'm not a banker, but you know, like that stuff's also good for business as well. And you like, I know it's a common thread that comes up in the chats around, you know, we can make stuff work really well for everyone. There's many people in the community that will benefit from it.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about my 20 odd years ago coming down to Australia and drinking the iced coffee. I think it was Farmers Union I had.
Yeah. Yeah, they make iced coffee. They're about one of the only ones that do. Some of the other milk companies don't make that brand anymore, but yeah.
No. So I mean, I'm chugging down cartons of coffee. I think you'll need some later on today. Antonio, I know you've got a question.
We have interviewed people from many different parts of the world, maybe to South America, and they all end up telling us about the status of accessibility in their countries. What I would like to know from you, when you are talking about accessibility, designing for people with disabilities in the public and private sector, with developers, with business, what are the points that you feel that you need to explain the most, and what are those that people realize, oh, this is the right thing to do? Because sometimes sometimes I end up on Twitter conversations with the word accessibility, and people, what are you talking about? What is accessibility?
Yeah. So I mean, I have a particular area of interest in working with people with intellectual disability. In my former job, that's where I did a lot of my work. So a lot of the accessibility issues that would come up for people with intellectual disability might not be on people's radars. So I think people can easily think about stuff like, okay, we need to have a ramp, or we might need to have braille on things, etc., like that. So the Council for Intellectual Disability in New South Wales is a great organisation, and it's great because it's led by people with intellectual disability. So they have no problem in telling you when you're getting it right and wrong, which is very refreshing, and then you're very switched on as to what the consumer needs. So they were great at sort of pointing out stuff like, we need to have easy read information, or we need to have pictures, or Anya, why are you using so many words? A great woman that I worked with, Kim, that's now passed away, I was saying to her one day, how do I explain to people what easy read information is? Like, I really need to be able to explain it to people when we're telling that they want it. And she just looked at me and said, Anya, it's easy to read. And I went, yeah, okay. So I was put back in my place. She just went, yeah, it's easy to read. People could just get it. So I think those communication and information, making that stuff accessible, I think can be a hard one, but I think people are getting a lot better. I think that's a good thing that the NDIS is trying to really work on as well, is sort of leading by example and trying to make much of their information and stuff that they put out accessible, and then showing other people how it can be done. Like signage and wayfinding stuff, I think can be a hard one for people to sort of get. So sort of, people can't think, oh, it's, it's not safe for people with intellectual disability to go out and socialise, or people can't get from places or go to other places, etc. You go, well, actually, people probably could if they understood the information, or if the bus timetable was easy to use, or if the instructions didn't have, 500 disclaimers on them before you actually got to the bit that said, catch the bus near the burger store, which might be what people need.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting thing too around the online and the offline, and technology is really, really great for some people and then not for others. And we often just talk about how do we have a blend and how do we use stuff. And we've always been interested too in the interface of having the support around someone to help you with the tech. So I'm sure I tweeted online one time that my mother told me that she'd broken Google, because we weren't near her, and she'd broken the computer and broken Google, and she often needs someone to sit next to her, as I do when I'm learning tech stuff, to show you what to do. And I think for lots of people with disability, the NDIS had not a hackathon, but some sort of event where they showcased lots of technology and sort of said, this is something people will be able to use in the future, and there's lots more options for stuff. And one of the big things that came out of that was, yes, there is, but if people don't know about what the technology is, that's a problem, because there was lots of developers and people at it, and they were sort of saying, oh, this technology can do that, or this can do that, etc. But we go, well, I have no idea about that. Or the people that are helping people to find stuff have no idea about it. Sometimes if you've got parents or older people helping people, they might not know what the latest stuff is, or have the patience to go through stuff with people, or get the right stuff for fit. So that can be a bit of an issue. But yeah, I think, still having, support to find what's what. And I think back to, I guess I've rambled, but I guess back to your original question is there's a whole range of things that can be made accessible. I guess, we sort of start with looking at, well, the person and what is it that they need and how we can sort of work it back. But I think you're right, there's a lot of light bulbs moments, I think, often when people see things or someone explains to them how they've actually used it. So I could talk about easy read information till the cows come home, but I think actually showing what a document looks like and how someone's used it and what's enabled them to do. And again, back to 19 stories, back to the whole end game of, changing hearts and minds to make things work for people.
Indeed.
Is the winner. Yeah.
So I'm fully with you on the need for cognitive accessibility, and actually a lot of it is down to design. It's easy to read, easy to find, and obvious. So one of the things that obviously happens is you've got this tension between the marketing department that is wanting to create
fill
these
up all the
dark
white
patterns.
space.
Yeah, or not even fill up the white space. So yes, you can be overwhelmed, but also you can have all of these things. Like a typical example would be the free antivirus, AVG, where they pretty much grey out the option where you want the free one, and they're pushing you down the route through big visible buttons to go and sign up to a trial that will eventually cost you money. Those kind of things are really bad for cognitive accessibility and people with learning difficulties. And also the trend to get rid of buttons. Our devices have less and less buttons. Now, that's great if you happen to know which ninja gesture triggers the features that you need.
And if you've got someone to show you that, or you've got someone to sort of say, oh, Neil, use this one. You need to press number 1. You're just like, I don't know, and then they give up.
But every time someone changes the gestures or removes a button, you're taking away an affordance, something that enables someone to do something easily. And unless you flag it up, lose the ability to do stuff. So there is a danger in tech that we are making stuff too neat, too tidy, and not easy enough to use. So it's just sort of like tidying away all of the tools and lock them in a shed at the end of the garden, never to be used again.
Yeah.
So
there's a real
go on.
I was going to say there's a real thing in for designers and making things look attractive, and then also needing to make things look accessible. But I think there can be a middle road of stuff that can be found as well. So people like to use nice looking things or have the latest device often, or
Of course.
you know, iPhone or wherever else like that, because that's what everyone else is using it. And where that's possible, it's great, but sometimes we do need to get back down to functionality, and sometimes the pretty designers can't deal with that. Yeah. Deb needs to say goodbye, I think.
Yes, yes. Deborah's got a birthday party to go to.
Yeah, my daughter Sarah is throwing me a surprise party for today, so I'm going to jump off. But thank you, everyone, and keep going.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Deborah.
Thanks.
Happy 21st birthday. Yeah. Well, we're close to the end of our half hour, but I think it is really important that stuff looks nice. One of the things that I think people rail against is the fact that you don't want to pay thousands of dollars for something that looks like it's a Fisher Price toy. Yeah, you want your gadget to be inclusive.
There's a real balance. There's a real balance, isn't there? Yeah. And I think the other thing too is that you want to, you know, often to look adult like and sophisticated and something that you want to use, because there's a real thing too for some people in the new technologies that it does have to be incentivized. So, you know,
I think sometimes we design assistive tech quite insultingly. What we've done is we've forgotten, we've left the aesthetics out. We've got the function, but we haven't thought about, you know, how we can make it look attractive too. So I think, yes, you're right. There is a real balance to be struck. Antonia, did you have a final comment before we close?
Remember, we interview our friends from Germany from Pixel Labor.
Yes.
Where they have a working space where they have people learning disabilities, trying and learning together all the operating systems. So they have machines with different operating systems, and they choose whatever they want to learn.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I think that it's a very.
There's really something in places that do stuff well. Like when we were designing easy read stuff, we designed with the consumer, so it would be led by them. And they would be co-designing it, and then we would say, you know, is it this picture or is it that picture, or what do you want the picture to like, or we might illustrate it, etc. as well. So like really involving people. We used to always say from the start is going to get you much better product in the end, and then of course you learn doing that. Often we'd get people saying, can you make a document or can you do something, and then only bringing you in at the tail end of the thing and only having limited scope to change what they'd already set up. It sort of doesn't work. But I think the learning together and learning aside, you get a much better product at the end. And I think it does take a bit of investment, but we used to sort of say to people, well, you want what you're doing to work. You don't want to invest your money in for it not to work. So if you want bang for your buck, we would, you know, recommend, you know, co-designing and, you know, really listening to people and what it is that they need.
Yeah, I think that's massively important. And when we look at designing in accessibility from the beginning, it's typically 2 to 3% of the total project cost. If you start unpicking stuff at the end, it's not huge. It's low.
That's really interesting. That's
an IT projects. But
that'd be really interesting to share, because people kind of just think it's too hard or it's too much to do.
Not if you do it from the beginning. If you do it at the beginning, the costs are actually quite low. They're less than some other quite normal costs. So, and yet we've had projects where stuff had to be redone completely, and you spent more than 100% of the project cost on retrofitting it. So, what's 2 to 3% for getting it right? It's nothing. It's within your it's within your buffer. It's within your contingency, or it should be, because you should have a contingency for your project.
I mean, that's right. And I wonder if this worked, and I guess similar in the ways that 19 Stories is about people telling their stories. I wonder if there's, you know, and I think that's where the chat's great, is, you know, more stories for developers and, you know, peers to sort of learn from each other and what they're doing and why they would do that, and you know, successful businesses talking to other businesses and stuff like that, because it's sort of like, well, actually, we thought it wouldn't work, but gee, it really did work well, and sharing some more of those successes. And I guess, you know, there's similar, you know, premises to 19 Stories, like share when things work, because we're always talking about when things don't work. Share what works, share how it's worked, explain it. And I think, you know, the generosity of people in 19 Stories and other stuff in sharing their work and the goodwill, because they really want things to work well for people, I think is a real sort of key and an asset that our community kind of has, because I find that most people are quite, you know, even though many people haven't had great lives, they're quite willing to sort of, you know, still share and open up and there's that real desire for things to sort of be better.
Well, we're all about positivity and sharing here. So,
Yeah.
and whilst we're thanking banks, we need to thank Barclays for supporting us and for keeping the lights on and helping us with the captioning. It's been great talking with you today. Thank you so much for getting up in the wee small hours. It's been a real pleasure. We'll see you and Piers for the Twitter chat tomorrow night. I'm sure it's going to be a real
I
good
know,
one.
yeah, it will be good, and Piers will have much more of the academic and story stuff to tell, where I'm sort of
Fantastic.
could advocate and activate, on anything to do with accessibility and inclusion. So we might be a bit more storytelling focused tomorrow, but
Okay,
that'll be good.
brilliant. Thank you so much, Anya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.